Dr. Craig, I also know, is a proponent of the A theory of time. And there are, broadly speaking, two, but there are more, but people talk about two. There's this A theory of time. The present is all that exists. The past does not exist. The future does not exist.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are jumping into a moment that genuinely shocked me when I first watched it. Alex O'Connor sits down with William Lane Craig, one of the most famous Christian apologists alive, and he calmly takes apart the Kalam Cosmological Argument piece by piece. We're talking Hilbert's Hotel, Aristotle, Einstein, the A theory of time, all of it on the table. Make sure you stick around all the way through because the real twist hits near the end, when Alex shows the argument actually contradicts itself from the inside, and that part alone is worth the entire breakdown. Also, drop a quick comment letting me know what country or city you're tuning in from today. I genuinely love seeing where everyone is watching. It makes this whole thing feel less like a YouTube channel and more like an actual community. Alright, enough setup, let's get straight into it.
The problem is that these assumptions are based on intuition. It seems as though this idea that the hotel will be full and also be able to accept new guests seems like a contradiction, but it's simply not a contradiction. There are two ways in which we could understand the hotel being full. Either full means that it can take no more guests, in which case Hilbert's Hotel simply isn't full, because it can take new guests. So maybe by full, what we mean is every room is occupied. That's fine. Okay, every room is occupied. But you can also acquire new guests. That's true even in non-infinite examples. Like if I had a finite hotel and every single room was full, but if a new guest came into the room, into the hotel, I could just build a new room for them. I could say, no vacancy, at least every room is full, and yet new guests can be admitted. So the idea that every room being full and it being impossible to admit new guests are the same thing is not true, even trivially in the case of that finite hotel. But because we're so used to them coming together, it seems that when they don't, we're in some unintuitive contradiction. But I don't think concepts like Hilbert Hotel are contradictory so much as they're simply unintuitive. And bear in mind that when we are forced into extreme philosophical circumstances, we are very often asked to give up some of our most foundational intuitions. The Christian asks us to believe that God is one and yet three at the same time, which many people find profoundly unintuitive, and most of the time is defended as a kind of mystery of faith that we'll never properly understand. We have to put our intuitions on the shelf and accept that this must be true. In the quantum realm, we're told that particles can be particles and waves at the same time, that superposition is a thing. That superposition is a thing that that things can be in the same place, so that two things can be the same place at one time, all kinds of assumptions that don't seem to make sense. Now, I think that infinity is surely one of the kinds of pressures that we would expect to upset our intuitions in that regard. On the point of the finite universe, could the universe have an infinite past? I really like this thought about having to traverse an actually infinite number of moments in order to get to the present. Right? This is my favorite argument because it's just so intuitive. How could we arrive at the present if you had to complete an infinite to get to the present? My question is this: an infinite number of what? Because, of course, potential infinites. Jack Symes, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh. Hello. I'm on, aren't I? I poisoned Johnny Thompson so I could get my seat back as host. It's worked out pretty well. For the sake of the footage, Johnny Thompson's just aged about 10 years. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Alex, you were saying.
That's okay. An infinite number of what? Because it seems intuitive.
This right here is where the entire Christian apologetics playbook starts crumbling, and Alex O'Connor knows exactly what he's doing. You have to understand, the Hilbert's Hotel argument has been used for decades by apologists to prove the universe can't have an infinite past, and Alex just casually walks in and dismantles the whole thing in under 2 minutes. When Alex said the problem is that these assumptions are based on intuition, he exposed the rotten foundation of the entire argument. Apologists love to talk about logical contradictions, but what they're really pointing to is just stuff that feels weird. Feeling weird is not the same as being logically impossible. And honestly, this is a distinction that more people need to understand, because intuition has been wrong throughout human history. Here's what blows my mind. The same people who push Hilbert's Hotel as a knockout argument will turn around and ask you to accept the Trinity. Alex absolutely nailed it when he pointed out, the Christian asks us to believe that God is one and yet three at the same time, which many people find profoundly unintuitive and most of the time is defended as a kind of mystery of faith. Do you see the double standard? When infinity feels weird, it's a logical contradiction that disproves an eternal universe. But when the Trinity feels weird, suddenly we have to put our intuitions on the shelf and accept it as a sacred mystery. You can't have it both ways. Either weird intuition counts as evidence or it doesn't. Pick a lane. And then Alex drops the question that should haunt every apologist for the rest of their lives. My question is this: an infinite number of what? That one question quietly demolishes the foundation of the Kalam Cosmological Argument, and most people don't even realize how powerful it is.
I was writing about the Kalam Cosmological Argument recently, and I was trying to defend it. And I found myself saying, in order to get to the present, you would have to surpass an infinite number of... And then I stopped, and I thought, well, what works there?
Events.
Maybe events. What's an event? I mean, okay, so I pick up this glass, that's an event, but that event can be subdivided. It's the event of my cognizing the glass and moving my arm and lifting it up and the friction between the fingers and the cup. Okay, so maybe just the event of the friction rubbing against the cup. But that event occurs across a period of time, and it can be further subdivided into individual moments. Like, events can always be subdivided into smaller events as long as they persist through time. You can keep dividing the time in half and say that it's made up of further moments. Okay, so maybe like moments then. But what's a moment? Like, what are we actually talking about here? Are we talking about, maybe we're talking about some measure of time. Maybe we would say something like, well, take seconds, or hours. That's fine. Maybe an infinite number of hours. Well, what's an hour? Of course, an hour is ultimately based on our, orbiting around the sun. But you could say, okay, but if the sun disappeared, we could still keep counting as if it were there and keep the timer going. Except for the fact that time doesn't work like that. And time doesn't flow at the same rate at every point in the universe. In fact, the people sat on the bottom row down here are aging more slowly than the people at the top. Congratulations. As Einstein showed us. And so I'm actually not entirely sure what things we're talking about that would need to be infinite and therefore unable to obtain in reality in order to have an infinite past. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the intuition. It still seems like a hard pill to swallow that the universe might have been past infinite. But it's a pill that many people swallow, not discluding, by the way, a certain Greek marble sculpture you may have heard of called Aristotle, who himself made this important distinction between actual and potential infinities and thought that actual infinities was something that couldn't obtain in reality. And yet Aristotle believed that the universe had an eternal past. He believed that the past stretched infinitely, it stretched infinitely into the past, that the universe did. And so it seems to me unclear. I mean, the two assumptions built into that particular point, in other words, are that actual infinities are impossible and that a past infinite universe would count as an actual infinity. Dr. Craig, I also know, is a proponent of the A theory of time. And there are, broadly speaking, two, but there are more, but people talk about two. There's this A theory of time. The present is all that exists. The past does not exist. The future does not exist. All that exists is the present moment.
Okay, this is the part where Alex goes from making a clever point to performing intellectual surgery. Because watch what he does. He takes the Kalam argument and tries to figure out what infinity is even referring to. And when he said, maybe events, what's an event? So I pick up this glass, that's an event. But that event can be subdivided. That's when you realize this argument has no foundation underneath it. Let me break down why this matters. Apologists confidently claim you can't traverse an actual infinite number of moments to reach the present. But Alex is asking the most basic question imaginable. What is a moment? Because if you can't even define what you're counting, how can you claim the counting is impossible? It's like saying you can't have infinity blorps without ever telling me what a blorp is. And then he goes deeper. He brings up Einstein. Alex pointed out that time doesn't work like that, and time doesn't flow at the same rate at every point in the universe. This is something people gloss over way too easily. Relativity is one of the most thoroughly tested scientific frameworks in human history. GPS satellites literally have to account for time dilation, or your phone's directions would be off by miles within a day. That's not theory, that's engineering reality. Quick context for anyone unfamiliar. Einstein's general relativity was experimentally confirmed during the 1919 solar eclipse, when starlight was observed bending around the sun exactly as he predicted. That confirmation reshaped physics over a century ago. So when Alex invokes Einstein here, he's standing on bedrock science, not speculation. Then comes the absolute kill shot. Alex brings up Aristotle. He said Aristotle himself made this important distinction between actual and potential infinities, and thought that actual infinities was something that couldn't obtain in reality, and yet Aristotle believed that the universe had an eternal past. Do you see what just happened? Apologists borrow Aristotle's distinction to attack an eternal universe, but the man who invented that distinction believed in an eternal universe. That's not Alex's opinion. That's documented philosophical history.
I also have some trouble with that because I don't know what the present moment is. I don't know when it occurs or how long it lasts. It's very difficult to actually pin that down. It's like an infinitely thin barrier between the past and the present. It's very hard to pin down. The other theory is the B theory of time, which says that time is a dimension of space. Many people interpret Einstein's relativity in this way. I know that Dr. Craig does not. And in doing so is in the minority of interpreters of general relativity in supporting a neo-Lorentzian interpretation of general relativity, right? Now, neo-Lorentzian, yes.
Yes.
Which retains the idea of an absolute time. I'm not convinced, in other words, that... Why did I bring up general relativity? Why was I just talking about it?
There's two things at the beginning, what you were saying.
Why was I talking about it?
I don't know. I've just got here.
Johnny would have known. Johnny, are you listening?
Johnny's not with us anymore.
I can't remember where I was going with that.
Johnny's in a cupboard. Johnny's in a cupboard somewhere.
If I don't jump into this
But please,
conversation,
let's have it.
soon I'm going to forget all that's been said.
Can I remind just two things at the beginning?
Oh, sorry. A theory and B theory. Just really quickly. A theory and B theory. Very simple. If the past does not exist, as Dr. Craig believes that it does not, the only thing that really exists is the present moment, then to say that the past is an actual infinite seems at least not obvious to me. The future doesn't exist. The future is a potential infinite because you keep counting into the future, on and on and on and on with no end. There's no point at which it's completed and exists as a whole. That would be an actual infinite, and that would be paradoxical. But it doesn't exist yet. Now, it's complicated by the fact that the past sort of has already existed in the past, but it doesn't exist right now. If the past doesn't exist, it seems strange to me to suggest that we can count it as this sort of boxed-off thing that we can point to and call an actually infinite sort of set of things. In other words, I don't know what a moment is. I don't know why an actual infinity is necessarily contradictory, and even if it's deeply unintuitive, sometimes, in unusual circumstances, we're asked to abandon our intuitions, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the case of the infinity, this would be one of them.
And here's where the whole thing collapses. This is the moment most people miss because Alex is so calm and so polite that the devastation doesn't even register. But what he's doing is showing that the apologetics position contradicts itself from the inside. Alex pointed out that many people interpret Einstein's relativity in this way, and Dr. Craig does not, and in doing so is in the minority of interpreters of general relativity. That is a quiet nuclear strike. You have one of the most famous Christian apologists in the world holding a fringe interpretation of physics specifically because the mainstream interpretation breaks his theological argument. That should set off alarm bells for anyone who's been told the Kalam is some unshakable proof. And here's what people don't realize. When you have to adopt a minority view in physics to keep your theology intact, that's not science following truth. That's theology shopping for the version of physics that works for you. There's a difference. Then Alex delivers the closing blow that should end this argument forever. He said if the past does not exist, Craig believes that it does not. The only thing that really exists is the present moment. Then to say that the past is an actual infinite seems at least not obvious to me. Just sit with that for a second. The apologetics framework requires that only the present moment exists. But the argument against an infinite past requires that the past be treated as a completed actual infinite. You cannot hold both positions at the same time. The argument cannibalizes itself. And what makes Alex devastating is how generous he stays. He said, I don't know why an actual infinity is necessarily contradictory. And even if it's deeply unintuitive, sometimes in unusual circumstances, we're asked to abandon our intuitions. That's not arrogance, that's intellectual humility crushing dogmatic certainty. He's not even claiming the universe is past infinite. He's just pointing out that the arguments against it don't hold up. And honestly, that's a stronger position than most apologists will ever achieve. Because when your argument depends on intuition, cherry-picked physics, internal contradictions, and ignoring the philosophers you cite, your argument was never strong to begin with. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.